so I need to wait for the red light.
So they're waiting, they need to wait for the red light.
Yeah.
There you go. There it is. Good afternoon. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's a workshop of the City Council of Fort Walton Beach on Tuesday, November 14th. We'll have another member joining us shortly, but we're going to go ahead and get started. If you want to stand with me, please, and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll get right to business. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, on the agenda is a discussion. We're going to discuss the downtown master plan density and zoning presentation. And Mr. Persetti, I think you're up.
Great, thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, we're excited to get to this stage in this process. So this is a process that really started with the downtown master plan that was approved by the council back in 2019, and there's a lot of steps. It was kind of a roadmap for us along the way. So this is one of the next steps that we're working on to move forward here, which is to discuss the density and zoning for the downtown core district that I'll go into here in the presentation. So really here in the presentation this afternoon, we're going to really talk about where the process has come to date, explain density a little bit. It's not common kind of language for a lot of people, so we're just going to explain density a little bit, go into the implementation of the master plan, and then also look at some of the recommendations and ideas that we've been reviewing between ourselves on the staff and through some public meetings that we've had over the last year or so. So moving to that, the first step is the process to date. So like I mentioned, the downtown master plan was a plan that was it was a process that we worked with Matrix Design Group back a few years ago, 2018-19, and it was approved, adopted to move forward with by City Council in 2019. Following that process, there was various steps along the way to implement the master plan. And some of those that I've highlighted here were the expansion of the Downtown Design Overlay District. That's really the area shown highlighted in the 3 different colors on that map. We did that process, that the DDOD, that Downtown Overlay District, was expanded a couple of years ago. Then there was also a library study to look at the future of the library and should it be downtown? Will it change? Will it evolve? Should it be somewhere else in the future? That process went through, and we do have a plan on file now and ready to utilize in the future when that time comes. We have an infrastructure master plan, which was really looking at some of the utilities, roadway connections, connectivity, mobility, sidewalks, bike lanes, and stormwater, sewer water within the downtown area. We do have a final draft that Matrix Design did, as well as that kind of comes into play with the around the mound and the next steps in that process. And then the downtown design guidelines, which I put here, is in development. That was money that was approved in the budget, in the CRA budget this year, to go out to bid, and that's a process that we plan to start within the next couple of months, probably after the first of the year, to work on that bid process. We are starting to draft up that scope for that bid now. Moving back into this process specifically, discussing density and the zoning. Going back to July of 2022, we held a town hall meeting downtown. It was a great turnout. We had over 70 people from the community show up to that meeting, and I presented a PowerPoint similar to some of this, talking about this topic. And really what this is, we'll get into, is looking at, for the downtown core, some higher densities and possibly another mixed-use zoning district to accomplish that. So during that town hall, we presented 4 options for density increases that are above our current MX2 zoning and densities. And then from that, we actually did an online poll, some survey results, got some good data out of that. And then we further reviewed it, refined it, and then really trying to get timing-wise this to fit into the PD&E for the around the mound and everything else moving on with the bridge. This summer, we moved into a stakeholders meeting that we invited specific to property owners and business owners within the downtown district to a meeting in August to kind of further drill into what this means and do another survey, get their data, and move forward. So, quick background that I do want to run into this process. Not going to read all of this, but these are just a few excerpts from our downtown master plan and our infrastructure master plan that really talk about this topic, which is what's discussed is the proposal for an MX3 zoning, something higher than our current MX2 mixed-use zoning that would increase the density. Currently, our MX2 has a max density with bonus provisions, which is extra bonus points of up to 45 dwelling units per acre. Base density is 30 dwelling units per acre in MX2. This is something the master plan recommends for a zoning district and density higher than that. The numbers shown on here are calculations that in the master plan, they showed different numbers of square footage and unit breakdowns for different types of uses within our downtown. For multifamily, looking at that use specifically, they had proposed and did their math, their numbers based on 452 dwelling units within the downtown and based on a distribution of 37% of the downtown. So what we did, me and my staff, we looked at those numbers, we calculated the square footage or the acreage of the properties downtown, we looked at the different sub-areas, sub-districts within downtown, and came up with some dwelling unit per acre numbers that would accomplish and reach the goals within here, and that's what I'm going to present tonight. So, just starting with density. I don't want to get too far ahead and start talking about numbers without probably explaining what density is to everybody. Density is simply just a number of residential dwelling units per acre. It doesn't control height, it doesn't control other parking standards, anything else, it's dwelling units per acre. So, what we do to calculate that is it's the size of a property times the maximum density equals the total number of dwelling units per acre. So put an example up here of if you have a 1.6 acre property and can have 30 dwelling units per acre, you can have 48 dwelling units on that property. Again, that's not taking into consideration everything else that you got to fit within the box, talking parking, stormwater, landscaping, looking at traffic and so on. But just looking at density, it's a pretty straightforward calculation to get to these numbers. Want to just go into what density is not. It's not a limitation on the size of the building. Like I said, we have height standards, we have lot coverage, we have stormwater standards, parking standards, and all these things. So, when we're looking at one building, it can have, say this box represents 48 dwelling units, similar to that example I just used. That same box, depending on the density number, could also, have 32 units per acre. So, we're not talking tonight about increasing height limits or any other standards. We're purely talking about just dwelling units per acre and density here in this discussion. So what we've done, I wanted to just also now highlight these are the downtown district designations. So what I'm going to discuss in here is related to the center, the red in this map. That is the downtown core district that was outlined and put together in the downtown master plan. As you'll see, there are 5 different districts within our downtown overlay district. And so each of them has a unique feel, character to it. It's going to have unique uses. For this discussion regarding density, we're going to talk about the downtown core district, which is really the center core of our downtown. Again, just move into that. It's that highlight here just to really stand out. It's that downtown core. This area currently, when you look at it for zoning, is either has a zoning of MX2, which is like our current mixed-use high, or CF, which is community facilities. Typically, our city, our Heritage Park Cultural Center, or the library. But those are the only 2 zoning designations within the downtown core currently. There are not any other commercial or other lower mixed-use designations within the core. And with that, currently the MX2 zoning does have a max density of 30 dwelling units per acre, like I mentioned, with a maximum bonus density up to 45 dwelling units per acre. All of this discussion here would be looking at those MX2 properties to potentially rezone and kind of upzone to a future MX3 with a higher density. We would not be touching any of those community facility zone properties throughout this process. So I wanted to kind of go through 3 of the options that throughout the stakeholder meetings, really what we kind of narrowed down the focus is, and that's the goal here, is really to discuss these options and have a good discussion, hopefully, about which direction we want to take. We want to give some examples. I think it's helpful, kind of have some visuals, some examples when we're talking about density and these kind of topics. So here's option 1, as we proposed during these public meetings, was a max density of 40 and a max with bonus provisions of 60. It's a smaller progression over that 30 and 45 that we currently have now. It's not a huge change, but it is certainly a change. And for example, when we're looking around, just to kind of give a visual to it, Presidio, right across the street here, they have a density of 32 dwelling units per acre. And that kind of plays into where I talk about it's not all about height and kind of building size and mass on a property, there's a lot more that comes into play, but, in their case, they have a density, that falls in line with our current MX2 zoning, yet it's, a tall structure we have in the city here, because you look at it, they have units ranging from over 2,000 square feet to 4,000 square feet of living space. So, this is our first option is a 40 and 60 increase. Like I said, it's just kind of a subtle progression from MX2. The second option we're looking at is 60 and 90. That's now, it's doubling the maximum base density and bonus provisions as well from where we are now. It's a bigger jump, and for example, on that, Southtown Apartments in Pensacola, if anyone's familiar with it, that's a development in Pensacola, and that project's at 69 dwelling units per acre. Scaling-wise, it's something that doesn't look the size of Presidio, but it's, much greater density when you're looking at units that are ranging from 600 square feet to about 1,400 square feet. Something to keep in mind with these when we're looking at these numbers, when we look at the base density and then the bonus, max density with bonus provisions, our comprehensive plan says that density can be increased by 1.5 times for bonus provisions. So typically it's 1.5 times whatever the base is what the bonus provisions is, and that's actually governed currently by our comp plan. So that's why we're going, 60, 90, and so on. So that's the second option that we did present to the public, to the stakeholders. And then the third option that we also presented, which is the highest option that we put in here, was an option 3 with a max base density of 100 dwelling units per acre with a max with bonus provisions of 150. This is an example here from Tallahassee that is at 150 dwelling units per acre. We did have some concerns listed here. Obviously, you're looking at parking and some of the standards, as well as it is a big increase over from MX1 goes 20, MX2 goes 30, and then MX3. That's where we're deciding now where do we want to have that next step in the process here. But this is an example. Like I said, from Tallahassee, they do allow up to that density there. Everywhere varies. We did a lot of research around the state, looking at cities. From here, right now, we're up to 45 dwelling units per acre with bonus provisions. Destin has some language in their comp plan regarding 40 dwelling units per acre. And Pensacola's got obviously some higher numbers too, heading up to 75 plus with some of their development. So, those are 3 options that we did present. Just to give an overview here, again, that's where we're seeing here. It is 40, 60, and 100 effectively is what we're looking at as options 1, 2, and 3. I will cover quickly here when we go into the survey results, but we did have actually initially another option in between options 1 and 2 on here. Initially, we did have an option 2 that was a smaller increase. So instead of from 40 to 60, it was 40 and then 45. And based on the initial meeting that we had, the public meeting we had, that was the lowest selected choice, probably due to how close it was related to option 1. So looking at the numbers, when we did our stakeholders meeting here this summer, we actually removed that one since it was the lowest to kind of streamline it, kind of really further refine it and get some more information and data, for going forward here. Want to show everyone the results from this that I was just talking to. The option, the downtown density town hall meeting on the left side was the first meeting that we held. This was the meeting that we had, well over 70 people attend from the public, and we did an online poll with a QR code during the meeting and had a lot of feedback from that. In here, the greatest, the largest slice of the pie is the option 4, which is the max density of 100 and 150 at 38%. 24% is the gray, which was the option of 60 and 90. And then actually tied for second was option 1 at the lowest at 40 and 60, and then option 2 at 45 and 68 was that middle ground that only had 14%. So, coming out of that, that's what we looked at and said, at 14% is very similar to option 1, so let's remove that one, give people the option, do they want to really go for the lower side of the spectrum, or do they want to move up towards the higher side? So this August, we did hold a stakeholder meeting downtown that we had a lot of good feedback, a lot of good interest in from the business and property owners. And in their survey results, it actually wound up, you can see it changing some. The option 3 at the max density of 100 and 150 went up to 50% of the votes that we received. The option 2 at 60 and 90 was 30%, and then the lowest option of 40 and 60 was only 20% of the feedback that we received. So you know, we've been compiling this data, and, you know, now, what we want to do really now is kind of have a discussion here. We did email out and invite the attendees of the various meetings that we had, from the 2 meetings that we had here as well, from the public, and really just have a discussion here and kind of get council's thoughts on this process. You know, there's the 3 options that are all obviously feasible. We could do something different as well, but you know, we've had some good feedback on these options, and you know, trying to kind of fulfill the vision of the master plan is why we're here now. This process, in looking at this, in the next steps here, once we move forward here, you know, hoping to get some good feedback, decide how we want to move forward as a city, as a council, and to make any change to any of these numbers, it will require an amendment to our comprehensive plan, which is a state coordinated review process, and we go through that process, and it would go through multiple hearings with council, and reviews by the state and other entities as well. And then also it requires a land development code amendment. So really, we're kind of at the step here to figure out which route we want to take, because the next steps, there's going to be a lot more process with the state, and a lot more steps with you all to really move forward formally with whichever route we take. So with that, I do just want to open it up for discussion here, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Allegretto.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 questions right off the bat, Mr. Paccetti. The second stakeholder meeting, you said both meetings were attended well. I believe you mentioned 70 people at the first meeting.
Yes.
And you did mention that those were owners of property and business owners downtown as well. The second meeting, what kind of numbers did we?
Yes, it was between 15 and 20. So the first meeting was open to the public for everyone. It was broadcast, you know, wide and far out for everybody. So I didn't include it here, but we actually even did have a question on there asking, what's your relationship to downtown? Are you a business owner, property owner, you know, kind of tourist guest, you know, a resident outside of downtown, or business owner outside downtown? You know, the majority were actually from outside of downtown that were in that first meeting, but it was over 50% outside of downtown. Second meeting, we invited specifically just property owners and business owners from downtown, so it was a smaller kind of focus group, and we had around that, I think it was about 15 or so attend there, and I think we had about 10 or 12 of those respond in the survey.
Okay. And then, is there a mechanism that would allow us, you know, if we went for one of the higher zoning or higher density options, is there a mechanism that would allow us to say that you must include a parking garage, for example, or you must include parking in your plan to develop those?
Yes, great question. And so with that, I kind of just breezed through it. I didn't talk about it maybe as much as I should have, but you know, this is one part of the puzzle. The parking is an absolute requirement of the code. Our code does allow that if there is sufficient, you know, nearby public parking available, we can utilize it. You know, as we, you know, I believe myself, and our staff knows, you know, there's limited parking downtown, and especially, you know, you look back to even the former landmark development that was supposed to happen, there had to be a parking component that they were going to have to, you know, provide parking for that. There's really not, you know, any available parking for any new development coming into downtown. So with this process, yes, there's parking standards in there. The other part of this process is the downtown design guidelines that we're going to be kicking off hopefully soon, getting a consultant involved in that process. And that part of that goal is to also put standards in there saying, hey, you know, maybe within this downtown core, within these certain areas, there's a requirement for an actual mix of uses on a development site that you maybe have a, you know, commercial or retail office component, say, as well as residential. Parking standards can absolutely come into play in that as well.
Thank you. I have 2 more, but I'll wait. Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, all right. Bryce?
To follow up on Councilman Allegretto, one piece of the puzzle, it's not just parking. You have stormwater, you have this, you have that. So even if this were to say 500 units per acre,
Exactly.
you've still got to confine to certain guidelines. So we would ultimately still have some type of oversight and control on.
Exactly.
And we also, the height restriction is
Yes.
120 foot across the board, right?
Exactly, and that's, like I said, you know, in that for our downtown at 120 feet, our heights across the city are consistent with the Eglin Tall Structures Analysis Map. They do have different zones for different heights. 120 is the highest that Eglin allows in the city. they can approve over that in certain examples, certain situations, but it is on a case by case through a major development order that would actually have to be approved by council and by Eglin. But 120 feet, we're not proposing to change that. Just like you said, this is one piece of the puzzle that, you know, even if density is higher, you still got to park cars somewhere, you got to still handle stormwater, there's landscaping, you know, there's all these factors that come into play. This is just one part that, you know, some of our feedback from hearing from some of the stakeholders is, hey, you know, if these numbers are higher, it makes it more appetizing, more appealing for us to do business and develop in the city here.
And I find it very helpful that even in both of your surveys, you know, the overwhelming majority both times wanted, whether it was different options too. One was option 4, one was option 3, but both times it was maximum density.
Yes.
So I think that's the fine line that I hear a lot in the community too, is well, we want to slightly grow our population, but we want to grow it with a good quality of people. How do we do that without becoming like some of our neighbors and being, you know, high rises and this and that? So we have the height restriction, but we can also do developments and welcome in a great quality of people. If we have a quality development, I think this would attract them. So
Yes, and like I said, this is also in that downtown core. You know, you have kind of the denser, you know, the higher density, you know, denser downtown core, and then it kind of, you know, kind of lowers down from there as it, you know, expands out into the residential.
I would ask, on that downtown core, when you said that red district,
Yes.
all these pictures on here are around the mountain. What does this look like around the mountain? Doesn't happen. What is our downtown core district?
It's actually very similar. I mean, it's bordered by First Street. You got Perry, First Street, and then Eglin towards the Gulfview over there. I actually have a map in my office that I did highlight this with out around the mound, and it's still very similar shape to this. It, you know, down from Brook Street up to First Street, Perry to kind of South Eglin Southeast.
You're just assuming that's already going to be done.
That's it. Optimistic.
Quick question, back to the parking issue. Is it a ratio, is like 1.5 spaces per unit or 2 spaces per unit? Or how do you?
Sure. For residential, it is 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Every use is different, so we do have a table of uses in our land development code for every, I would say every use imaginable, with many uses in there. There's also a standard for parking study, so if an applicant comes in, they have to hire an engineer. They can actually do a parking study based on best practices. There's national standards for this, that they can even come in and propose something different, you know, than code if they want to do so.
Thank you. Other questions?
Sure. During your presentation, I was a little, but I didn't hear carefully enough. The entire, is it red area, the core district? Are we going to be doing that entire district, and or are you proposing we do it the entire district in the new MX3 designation?
In this district. So this district right now only has MX2 zoning or community facility zoning. So we would be proposing to change the MX2 zone properties to MX3, just in the red.
How about the community zoning? Would you change those as well?
No, sir. That's mostly city properties. The Heritage Park Cultural Center, the library are really those in that district, and we would not propose changing those.
And Destin's numbers, the normal density and then the maximum density, would you remind me what those were?
I believe from what I've found, it is 40. I don't know if Kim knows of anything different,
So-
but I know my research I did see in their comp plan, it talked to 40
That'd be 40
dwelling
or
units per acre
60.
for residential uses. So.
And then the master plan prepared by Matrix, what did they suggest we put in this core district?
So they didn't provide a hard number in their plan, and so when we were looking at, they did do the breakdown of 452 multifamily units in downtown. When we did the math, we looked at the actual acreage of properties within the downtown core based on a distribution of 37%, which is what they proposed. That came out to 95 dwelling units per acre is what it basically reached to hit their number.
So their number would be closer to your option 3.
Yes, sir.
Could I ask one more? I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
As far as the parking, I know that there's some special circumstances in the downtown district that allows people to utilize the public parking. And I think I heard you say a moment ago that our public parking is maxed out. So should we not include that in MX3 so we don't give some sort of false hope that there is something they can utilize, or how do we address that?
We can absolutely address that in here. You know, it's a provision in the land development code right now, but if it's something that, what the land development code says that, you know, you can utilize it if available, and the city will basically just keep an inventory to see if it's available. In the last couple of years, we've only had a few small developments, new developments that have come in with kind of in the downtown area. I'll say for one example, at the venue on Brook Street. They were one that they were trying to get their parking counts to work, and so they were requesting to use a little bit of kind of the on-street parking nearby there. We did allow them to use a couple of parking spaces, but the vast majority they actually had to put on site there because we say, look, there's just not parking in this area. And that's a small development compared to anything that we're really talking about here. But I think in the downtown design guidelines and the land development code, that's really something that we can address and just kind of, I said, make it clear that they don't get your hopes up. So,
I just know we have a lot of
yes.
parking that comes and goes,
Yes,
and
it does.
and that's a struggle, but, thank you.
Well, just to answer your question about Destin so that nothing is misleading, their highest density is 24 per acre. So those old numbers were replaced.
Okay.
But
So-
not that it matters, you can go way above that, but you asked the question, so.
So their standard density is 24.
No, it depends on the zoning district, but that would be the highest in multifamily in the TC and in the town center mixed use. So depends where you are. There's other districts that are lower. But again, you all can go much higher as Chris is saying.
So
Which
our MX2 is more dense
Yes.
than their highest density use?
Yes.
Interesting.
Mr. Berry?
Okay, Indianola, how many units are there? And is it 16 stories?
No, unfortunately, I don't have the numbers offhand for theirs. And they're are you talking Presidio across the street?
Oh, Presidio, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
yeah, wait. Yeah, Presidio, they're 15 stories, I believe, and I don't have the exact numbers offhand. I know they're 32 dwelling units per acre there, but I don't know the size acreage offhand.
And then there's 200 west down,
Yes.
west of there, and that's smaller.
Yes.
Yeah. My concern, those two facilities, 200 west and the Presidio, they've handled their parking well. You know, it's all underground, you know, reminds me of San Francisco, you know. And this is what, you know, is this what we're expecting to do here if we build?
I think that's the vision. I think that's what the downtown design guidelines, that's what our goal is to address in those design guidelines is how development's going to look and be built.
Well, over there behind Alley's, I think, the restaurant, there's those condos back there on the sound side. Aren't those like about 4 or 5 stories there? And their parking is outdoor parking, I believe. And are they having any difficulty with their parking space, or are they using public?
So not that I've heard. I know we don't have any issues with them from our side that we dealt with.
Yeah, because as the conversation you and I had before the meeting, I would love to see a parking garage where, next to the Heritage Museum and Cultural Art, right next door there, you know, and make it as high as they would allow us, you know, maybe put stores down below and then raise them as high as we can for parking. You know, I'm surprised we haven't done that yet, or haven't, you know, planned that.
For sure.
Yeah, because just in our little neighborhood, it's not apartments or anything, but it's MX2, and we're fighting with the people. They're crammed into these little spaces over there next to the recreation center, and you can't get in, garbage trucks can't get in and out to empty the garbage cans, and people are having to walk out in the street because they're parked over the sidewalks, you know, so they're using, you know, they say they have a little garage there, but they got huge trucks, you know, so this is what I'm concerned about happening here unless we make those provisions.
Mr. Walker?
Sure. So I started with the agenda, and it told me to go, we were going to be talking about MX3 zoning based on the recommendations in the downtown master plan. So I pulled up the recommendations, and are there any updated, I mean, I went to the website, I pulled these down. Is there any updated recommendations from the master plan? This is it. So, you know, I see a lot of things referenced in here, and one of them's downtown stakeholders. You brought it up. I'm a downtown stakeholder. I own a building down there. I've never gotten an invite. Are they mailed? Are they?
We did have an email list. I know for this one, back in August, it was an email blast that was sent out to a stakeholders list that we've had for a number of years.
It's on all of the plans, even including the approved plan, you know, line. My building's not shown on there. It's gone, so it looks like it would be on the acquisition list, but that for anybody who's not done it already, including the public, the recommendations list that's provided and is very insightful and helpful. And so as I'm listening to people ask questions and, you know, Presidio, largest building, and how tall is that?
It's feet,
Yeah.
it's, I believe around 160 feet or so.
Okay, so then we're limited at 120. We've already got, and you said that one's at 32 per acre. And we've already got 45 per acre that can come here through bonus. And we're looking to create another one for greater density. Is that stated correctly?
Yes.
You know, so in my mind, I'm trying to imagine what in the world does that building look like?
Sure.
Is there a rendering anywhere already?
Say, for which one specifically? I mean,
Well,
any or?
any building
Yeah.
that can accommodate, because I wrote down, you said this is not a limitation on size, and then you said, then I asked, well, how can you increase density with not increasing the size?
Right.
And so,
Yeah. You know, here's one example of 150 dwelling units per acre. This is a development in Tallahassee. You know, and you know, going back here, this is development in Pensacola at 69, kind of that option 2 there. So, you know, these are, when we're looking at zoning here, we're not in density, we're not looking at a site-specific property and development, we're looking at, you know, district as a whole.
sure.
So we're looking, that's, you know, across the board, that's some examples here that we want to look at and say, you know, the box is 120 feet. It wouldn't, you know, that's what it is currently. It wouldn't change with any of these proposals. It would really just change how the box is, you know, chopped up inside, how it's divided out within that box.
Thank you. And several times you've mentioned, and it's mentioned throughout here, residential units. Does a hotel qualify as a residential unit?
No, sir.
Okay. Where do they fit in currently in the current zone? What restrictions or densities does a hotel have to meet?
What's called floor area ratio, so it's a commercial use, and what we have, it would come back as part of this process is we have floor area ratio, which is basically the amount of square footage of a commercial use on any given site, and so they fall into the same floor area ratio as any other type of commercial use, whether it's offices, you know, restaurants, you know, retail. They fall into a floor area ratio standard and have their own parking, which is 1.1 parking spaces per unit, per room, excuse me, and they fall into that category.
Yeah, and so, Jeff, looking at these recommendations and, you know, only, you know, getting into, you know, I wasn't around in 17 when this all came to be, and, you know, these recommendations that are listed here, they look pretty good. I mean, as far as a process to follow, but here we are talking about the MX3, one specific little change, and then, you know, which I did, I spent some time looking at it. Afterwards, medium 2 to 5 years, which from 17 to now, we're in that phase, you know, based on that. I know some of it's gotten out of whack, but it says on number 9, refine and implement land development code revisions after the PDE has been completed. That's been completed, right? Has the PD and E been completed?
For Round Mountain?
Midterm post PD and E during Brooks Bridge construction is what it's listed under, 2 to 5 years. I know originally the city was wanting to combine efforts with the bridge and around the mount and stuff, so we obviously know that's not happening at the moment, but still we're looking at a framework of how this all comes together, or could come together, and knowing things change, but you know, I was just looking at it, and the reason I'm asking is we're here today to talk about MX3 only, and the density that creates in my mind to see that building up there, to think that it's right down here is massive. I mean, it's a massive thing, and definitely, you know, community input on having multiples of those down here in our community is definitely something we're going to want to get community input on. I know that we're here talking about this. The city, at such time, the city should conduct a wholesale rewrite of its land development code with particular attention paid to density requirements that allow it. So we're talking about MX3 today, but we also, the recommendation is that we have a wholesale rewrite of it. Why must this come before a wholesale rewrite? Are we going to piecemeal little things to the land development code to happen, or is it going to be a wholesale rewrite?
you know, our plan has been to kind of go step by, this is one part of the process and go step by step with this. We are also going to look at the allowable uses. You know, MX3 as a new zoning district would have its own list of allowable uses. We're all looking at the downtown overlay district for this MX3 specifically. So our vision has been to go step by step within the current land development code, look at the downtown design guidelines, look at the density, and look at the allowable uses. You know, I believe towards the schedule on the PD&E that was referenced, it was to do with around the mound. That's kind of why over the last couple of years we've slowed this process down, waiting for that to take place. We did the first stakeholder meeting in July of 2022, then we gave it, you know, about a year there until this summer to come back with the stakeholders and follow up on the next stage. For us, we know that any process here to go through for the comp plan amendment and LEC amendment, you know, is going to take, you know, another 6+ months. So, you know, really we just wanted to kind of get the input now, you know, where it's kind of the council's thoughts on this part of the process and kind of move step by step throughout it.
Sure, and so, you know, looking at the rest of it, a couple of things in the recommendations of the master plan, you know, it makes sense again, but it seems that I don't sense the order so much. I know that in several portions of it, it's talking about the finances and, you know, cost analysis, market analysis. When I looked at the numbers from 2017 when this was developed, I think $185 million was the core infrastructure, the private sector, and then you had land acquisition, which would be by city and grants and other things, and then $30 million for the road. You know, if that, the last time that's been updated is 2017, is that correct? Have there been any updated figures on that?
Not that I know of from then.
Okay, so, you know, here we are talking about something, and those numbers from 2017, we know what's happened to construction costs, labor costs, everything costs. We might now be up in the, I'll make up a number, 400 million. And so when we do that, and you know, I've again not been a part of it since 17, but something I found really interesting in here, and it might be time for us to maybe even talk about it. There is a development manager, higher position here that is trained and experienced in development. What do they call them? They call them as, it is recommended the city hire a master developer to coordinate, plan, design, market, consult, and generally execute the redevelopment of the downtown. You know, I've been involved in developments, and when things are presented to me or I'm presenting to them, we start with the cost. We look at the profit, we look at the return, we look at that, but we're not doing that here. We're going off 2017 numbers, so I just feel we're out of sync here with bringing this all together in the for what it's worth category. The recommendations, Jeff and guys, we can all send them. I don't know if you've all looked at them or everything else. It looks like the beginning of a really good roadmap, but it's not sequential. You know, when this happens, when do I get a market update? When do we get an update on construction? When do we get this? It's just kind of mixed match in there. And from my perspective now, we've gone into this very good and comprehensive document, and we pulled out one little piece of it and said, hey, we want to talk about MX3. And I'm like, I'm not sure that we've had that recommendation yet from maybe a developer, master developer. It goes, look guys, the greatest return on developer, the private sector's money does not require MX3. It's actually will work with MX2, that density, the amount they can get, the traffic, and all that kind of stuff. So I don't mind talking about MX3. To me, it's a little scary just to think that thing could be right up here, and we've not, I mean, you know, to have 70 people show up at a community event and say, I like number 3, when we don't really know who they are, or they have an interest in it down here. You said many of them weren't from down here, or they just interested neighbors that say that sounds good. Well, that's nice to know, but I don't want to give a lot of weight to their opinion if they're not a stakeholder kind of, or an investor themselves. An investor will come to us and tell us, guys, I can work at your 120 feet, and I can work at the 40 or 45. I don't know why you guys are even talking about 150 units, because I'm not going to develop that. Your density population won't work. So I feel we're out of sync a little bit, and I would suggest that we go back and look at the recommendations and maybe come up with a sequential order of presentation. And when do we hire that developer manager? When do we get market analysis updates, construction cost updates? So that's my thoughts on it thus far. Thank you.
Sir. Go ahead, Bryce.
We can't build that down there though, right? Because that's how tall?
It's over 120 feet tall.
Yeah, and this would be 120 feet.
Yes, and we're not proposing changing heights, so, any 120-foot tall building can come in or, be submitted tomorrow to be built anywhere, within the MX2 zoning district in the city.
And that's where the density thing just gets me confused. If I can already go to 120 and we're at 40 and, there, I think you said Presidio is at 32 an acre, right?
Yes, sir.
And we're asking to go above 45, it's just mind-boggling. Are you thinking that the sizes of the units, because you mentioned 2,000 to 4,000 square feet there at Presidio, obviously the square footage, if you make them 600 square foot units, that would, increase the density there. And you mentioned there's some I'm interested in hearing from any out here who say, I've got an idea, I've got a plan, I think the market will support 400, 600 square foot units at a market rent of X. Are they going to speak tonight?
I said there are some here tonight. I don't know if they would plan to speak or not.
To your question a few minutes ago as to whether there were any renderings, we don't have a staff rendering, but there was an early rendering done by a potential applicant who hasn't formally applied for anything yet, but Mr. Dowd is here, and this is associated with that development. So we didn't want to talk about a specific project,
Sure.
but just by way of a potential example, there's some renderings here that Chris can probably scroll through.
And that is greater than 45 an acre?
That would, good afternoon, John. Yeah, that would take about 90 an acre.
What size square footage are those units generally? What's the range?
They're from high 500s to 800 square foot units, and they're kind of made for a younger person, not yet married, the kind of person that downtown seems to draw, and I guess we would like it to draw.
Military, perhaps?
And in these same development standards, again, these got to be built to Florida Building Code, right, Chris? So it's not like we're going to put 100 square foot units in there. We still have code, we still have other pieces of the puzzle that all go together.
Yes, sir.
Like I said, military and this and that. So this could also attract, a lot of people look at this and say, what's it going to be for this one developer? To me, what I see something like this attracting is a high quality of population growth that in turn knocks over a domino to where another developer says, oh, I'm finally going to open that restaurant I want to. I'm finally going to open this down there because now we have the foot traffic down there to possibly support that. I know parking's an issue too, but when you look at things like this, you got people walking, you got people on e-bikes, riding right by our officers on their new e-bikes. So I like that.
So you mentioned these renderings. This was in the presentation before I got in?
This is not part of the presentation.
Okay.
You had asked if there was ever a
Yeah,
rendering.
no.
This was not done by staff. It was a client of Mr. Dowd. But again, this isn't a formal application.
Sure.
It's just an example of potentially, and I don't even know if it was done to code. Maybe you can speak to it.
Yeah, this is that property on Perry in 98, and my client back here is the current owner of it. And this is a rendering done by an architect that is...
Former landmark?
Yes,
Okay.
it's diagram, but he has not, this is very preliminary, and he's like back here saying, please don't, I don't want to, and I understand it, but it's very preliminary, but just to show you, that it's, I know when you think of Presidio, it scares you, but the majority of those units are the 3,000 to 4,000 square foot units, and you can really build something nice with a high density and it fit in, this is, we call it an infill development where you kind of hide the parking so it looks better instead of people building ground level parking on hotels and things like that. So, but this is done to scale generally, but the number of units obviously can change, just like Chris was saying in the box, depending on what happens. But to do what they would propose to do would take a density of 90.
Well, that's what I was looking for, because to give you a concept of what would go there, the buildings look nice. Obviously, it's a big change from what downtown has, been. It's,
And the goal, just when Kim heard you ask the question about somebody have a picture, she asked me, can we just, and so my client said, because it does help when you can see it. And I think it makes sense, because I've been here, I was here in 2000 when people were saying, please get the density up, and everybody was fighting it. And it just seems like over the years, if you put the density up there, you'll draw a higher level of developer. It doesn't mean they can do more units than can be done on a piece of property. As we said, you still gotta have your parking, you still gotta have your landscaping, stormwater, every single thing. But, the less restrictions on things, the better developers look at it as they can be more creative there. So I think, to me, that, I grew up here, been here my life. To me, that seems like a good thing for downtown. It could use a spark like that and good people, that'll do good things that are, from the area and want to make the area better. That's what this line is.
Mr. Dowd, to your client back there saying, please don't share it tonight?
Well, it's very preliminary, so he doesn't want somebody to come back later and say, hey, that's not how it was when you showed it, because it could be that there are things that you have to change in the design, but there's been, it's been a lot of effort, a lot of expense to get something, start working on this. They're
Are
not planning.
the clients and developers from here?
Yes, they grew up here, yes.
So they grew up here from here, and they're willing to come back and put their money here?
Yes.
I'm up here saying, please build it.
Yeah.
Not, please don't show it, please build it.
I appreciate it. I understand all the concerns for certain. You got to be very careful. But I think the overwhelming thing to me is the fact that you still got to have all your parking. You still got to have all your landscape. You got to have every one of those requirements. So you can't just build it. Unless you can do everything on it. And that gives you guys kind of the last word on things. So, but thank you for the time. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Okay. Are you an architect? Are you the architect?
I'm an attorney.
Attorney. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well,
Sorry.
Is this what they were showing when they were first talking about building on that corner lot?
This is different. My client bought the property from the former owner that had previously had the agreement with the city. So no, this is a completely different design.
Okay, good. Yeah, because they had talked about having the parking, and I remember offices and then apartments and then the parking up above, I think it was. Is that similar to what what this is?
Yes, ma'am. We may be coming back to you to talk about that again, but this is kind of an essential element of that. So, we were just kind of feeling out what happens, where you guys are at, and then obviously you'll be involved in the whole process of whatever happens there. But, when they first came to me, they mainly build hotels and residential type developments, and they could build a hotel that quick, and it just concerned me to see them build a hotel with a bunch of parking. All you see is parking when you drive by that piece of property. It's not much different than what you see now. And so I told them, you should talk to the city like the last people did, because we could really do something impressive there. And that's what this is kind of designed around.
Yeah, because I see a lot of that east of us, like, is it Baytown or out over that
So,
way?
yes,
I see something like that happening here, or what we're talking about here. And they ended up building a parking garage there also. Yeah. And a lot of times when you're redeveloping areas, you have to use parking garages, or as somebody was saying, parking under the residential living, or it just looks bad. And if you can really do it and incorporate that parking in, it just looks like a part of the building. It's really impressive. If you go down to South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, or those areas, that's what you see, because it used to be, a bunch of houses and old buildings, and nobody owned a big hundreds of acres. You had to buy this and that, and then figure out a way to fit it into the landscape. And that's what this is. Yes, that's what I'm seeing. Oh, and even years back, the stores all used to be downstairs and the parking lot downstairs. Yeah.
Right.
That's my office right there beside that parking garage. I see it, and it's hidden up there. It's in the shadow. It'd be at my back door. I've always liked the idea of the landmarks being developed. Those are going to be, as it stands now, those are going to be individually for sale, or is that corporately owned? Mixed use, commercial, residential, and maybe some short-term stay.
Yeah, so, we had, there's only two uses.
Could you come up please.
Sorry.
Introduce yourself. please.
Manoj Char. So we only have two uses we want to do here. We want to do the multifamily component, which is market rate apartments. And probably a percentage of that would probably be what I call attainable housing also. And then about a 90 to 100 unit hotel up in front. We feel that this could drive a lot of the demand in the market when it comes to the office space you had mentioned, food and beverage, the boutiques we have, from the coffee shops to, we have a lot going on already. We're just missing that component of getting people there, people living there, people walking there. And with the new bridge coming in, with the expansion of that, and the pedestrian-friendly walkways, you have Publix across the street, it's an ideal place for people to be living. Because everything we have on the water, it's great, it's nice, but most folks can't afford that. Right? People can usually, you have small military families, you have military folks, they can afford, $1,700, $1,800, $2,200 type rents, which that's what we're targeting here in the multifamily portion of the building.
So market rents, no individual purchases, condominiumized, no, gotcha.
Just, 12-month, 14-month type leases for apartments. I think, we have a good amount there already. That's like Indianola and all those other products in the back there already. So,
Thank you.
and this was built on a massing study, so we did do a massing study on the property before we actually added the elevation of the facades to this. So this could be pretty realistic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jeter.
I think to Chris, we're really just approving, you're looking for us to approve MX3 and which option tonight. This development would come back before us for any kind of questions and approval and.
No, there's no development approval at all. He's
No,
just,
I'm
okay.
saying this would come back. We're not even at that stage yet.
This
We're
isn't
just seeing
even,
a hypothetical version of what we could create by approving option 3.
exactly, this has not even been applied for, and council member Payne over here asked for an example, so I went over to John down in the audience, and I said, can we use your rendering as an example?
Correct.
That's all.
So by none of their answers to this questions means if we take any action, it's not going to be this is happening.
Nope, the developer's not committing to any of this, and you guys are not committing to any of this.
Okay, Mr. Allegretto.
So I was going to ask this question earlier, but it seems we've kind of moved a little further past it. But this is a density that you have heard from people that own property downtown in this specific area. Hey, that would be an attractive thing for me as a developer to want to build my development in this area. If only this density existed, this would attract me to come here and build something.
Yes, exactly.
And that's pretty much the feedback that because all of these densities in your pie chart were higher densities than we currently have.
Exactly.
And again, just for the public, for everybody to understand that this is not the entire city.
Right.
This is not even the entire downtown. This is only that core red area that you showed earlier.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Jeter. Yes, sir.
Mr. Allegretto, that's some good thoughts, and he actually acquired the property with those in place. So it's not that he was prevented from buying it because he went ahead and bought it. He acquired it from Landmark with those existing 40, 45. He is wanting to increase it. It leads a question to me to you. So, we're talking about around the mound, we're talking MX3, that entire area, but we really have, tonight, only as an example, and it looks good to me, sounds good to me, what I see up there, but are there any chances, let's say we weren't talking about MX3 today, and we weren't talking about a wholesale rewrite of the land development code, and the developer came to us with this and said, guys, I bought it, I thought I'd be able to do this, but because of construction cost and profit returns and everything, I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do. I'm either going to have to hold on to it for 20 years or wait for it to come up. But is there any way that just this property alone could have an individual look at it and designate it as a density higher?
Not today.
Not today, and and it won't. The other ones, you said we got to go through a whole state process and everything else. So, I'm trying to balance that's exciting to see. It's beautiful, and I know it will be a landmark in the community, but to think that while we like this one and we're going to go ahead and just make the whole area can do this as well, it kind of triggers my other little thing that the entire community down there is going to be these. And so, you know, there's this balance that I like to keep a little bit of small. And so if we wholesale to MX3, that whole place, there's nothing that would prevent us other than a vote of no. And that, you know, if it meets the land development code and everything else, we'd have a hard time saying no to a particular project. We know that, right? So there's no way that we can single this property out to, why is that?
So, contract zoning, so to speak, or singling out one property has some legal issues. But what you can do, I mean, there's things you can do. If you want to limit the area where the increased density is allowed, I mean, you can make the zoning district cover smaller than that entire red area. You don't have to.
Like that one place. But
You should not single out a property. But there's things you can do in codes where if a property, a type of property is appropriate, it would work there and not elsewhere. For example, you can have minimum acreages for density bonuses. There's a lot of things that staff could come up with. And if that's the direction the council wants to go to limit it more than that entire area, I'm sure we could come back with suggestions. But to single out a specific project or property would probably not be legally justified.
how many acres? Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, at that point, yeah, it was just, obviously the developer's got smarts in the business and that would work for him and if that comes to be. So today, but this MX3 process, I mean, state approval, us, all the meetings, readings and everything else, if things happen next meeting, how long would it be before MX3 came to be? 6 months, a year?
Less, yeah, 4 to 6 months, you know, through that process. There's 30-day appeals periods through the state to review it. It comes back, you know, so there's corrections needed, you know, depending on an additional 1 or 2 meetings of council for the comp plan, but there's also LDC amendments. So, you know, 4 to 6 months.
Mr. Mead.
Can I have a question for Mr. Dowd, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here. You helped to bring this conversation from a hypothetical to a real, more narrowed and focused conversation, so thank you. When, I know this is a workshop, but when this becomes an agenda item, I believe you said this is a 90 unit per acre project that you're proposing. I know this is a hypothetical, but at least a very focused one. Was that correct?
In that rate. It'll take at least about that, yes, sir.
So option 2, it seems like option 2 might work with the maximum density. That was a 60 or 90 with the maximum density.
Well, I guess what Reese said, 90 with the bonuses. It's gonna take 90 with bonuses.
Okay, so would that meet within your client's criteria, would you think?
Well, let's see, so if it's 90 with bonuses, it brings it up to 135. So in reality, it's gonna take about 135 an acre to do what he's intended to do, but the zoning category would be 90.
Okay, so it wouldn't be our option 2 that was presented, it would be closer to option 3, which was 100 or 150 with bonuses.
Right, or you know, if the council said we don't like 100, but we'll do 90 or whatever, that 90 would work. And that's why I would say 90 would. This is about 90, just so you know what you're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
90 with bonuses.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
It's
With bonuses or plus bonuses?
counting the bonuses.
Counting the bonuses.
Yeah, so it's going to take about 135 an acre to do that. But you can see it's not massive. They did a whole study as to that issue. It's not massive, and in addition to those units, there's also a hotel on the property. So you would think there's no way when you think about Presidio that you could put over 200 units in a hotel, but it's really not, doesn't create that. If you do the units right, it doesn't create that massive of a building.
My small building will feel smaller, trust me.
Got some shade some of the day. Summer.
Just real quick on MX3, Kim, this might be for you or Chris, either one. Under 7B of the recommendations, further lotting and blocking of properties is required to determine future MX3 density requirements. What is lotting and blocking required for MX3?
Okay, sorry. Well, that's part of that, what I discussed, we actually looked at the acreage of the properties downtown to determine what that density number comes out to. It's really doing the math, doing the calculations there of the property size downtown to determine the actual density. That's was another question came up earlier, what was the number in the master plan? They didn't have a number. When we kind of ran the numbers we came up to, it was about 94.5 20 per acre is what that math came out to be.
Good. Maybe my last question on this, but I'd almost forgot about it. Actually, under that same limitation or requiring, and I didn't get an invite, didn't make it to the one downtown, but I spoke with some people afterwards, and the concern was that there was discussion and maybe even the likelihood that, because I own a single-story building, I've been considering placing a second story on it for an Airbnb or an office not determined yet. So I had heard through the rumor mill that you were going to have to, in order to these, you were going to be required to go 3 stories. Is there any truth to that?
That's not discussed as part of this process. Back in initial stakeholders meetings during the downtown master plan implementation, there was discussion of future developments having to be required for multi-story development, for all new development. That would be part of the downtown design guidelines process to really be discussed there. That wouldn't be affected in this process.
Well, that's interesting then, because you, in these recommendations, it does talk about MX3 being primarily architectural. And so again, I'm trying to get clarity. My building a single story, I want to add a second story to it. What process would I go that I may be denied adding a second story, either now or in the future, that say, no, you can't do that because you've got to be 3 stories? Is that a part of MX3, the architectural design, or any of that?
It could be in that process. Typically, if it's a non-conforming use, then we're going to look at whether it's conforming or non-conforming when it comes in for redevelopment. That could be part of that process in the future with design guidelines. That'll have its own set of stakeholder meetings and council meetings.
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling to think that I want to add a second story on top of my building, and I'm denied based on the fact that I must have 3.
You could put it, the council's going to be the responsible party for writing the code, right? So you could put something in there that says you can do developments that reduce legal non-conforming uses. For example, if you decided to put in a minimum 3-story requirement, you could say, but if you're already existing as 1 story and you're trying to get closer to full compliance, you can do a second story. See what I'm saying? As long as you're not increasing the non-conformity. And that's not in the code now, but we're just brainstorming in a workshop.
And we do have a process for modification of non-conformities.
Yeah.
So if you have a situation that's non-conforming and you want to make a change to it, it goes to the local planning agency, to that board, and they do.
It wouldn't be non-conforming right now if I wanted to add a second story.
Correct.
That's conforming current.
Yes, sir. And I'm trying to think back, because it was back 3-4 years ago now, some of the discussions, and I do recall, I know talking about a 2-story minimum. I honestly don't recall even talking of a 3-story minimum back during those stakeholder meetings. I do know there was talk of requiring 2 stories in certain areas downtown, but even those meetings wasn't for that discussion. It wasn't really the topic at hand there. So there's nothing set in stone. That's really what we'll be talking to council is, do we want to require those changes? Not. There'll still be avenues through modification non-conformities or variance or other things if it was in place in the future. But our goal is not to definitely discourage any expansion, any redevelopment, any new development, or improvements of existing properties.
Mr. Berry.
Mr. Walker brought up that word, that phrase I'm afraid to say, Airbnbs. I'm fearful that we're opening ourselves up to Airbnbs from like what we're seeing in South Walton County and other places. Have we got to that point yet, or is it?
So
Are short-term rentals currently allowed in MX2?
We don't regulate them currently. I know we've gotten some data actually from
So
Wisconsin
then
and
if
all
they're-
that we've looked at.
If the use of a short-term rental is not currently prohibited in the zoning code, you're not going to be able to prohibit it going forward under the current state law, because it says right now that local governments cannot prohibit short-term rentals in an area that allows other residential uses. So if you had a prohibition prior to the statute in 2011, you would be able to prohibit them, but now you can't, so they're allowed in that area.
Which
They're
one?
allowed in all areas, right? That's what you're saying? Local
Any
government
area
can.
where you haven't prohibited them since 2011, that you allow residential. So I wouldn't say all
I have
areas.
them in R1, MX2, yeah, they're out there.
Mayor, if I could-
Yes, sir, Mr.
What
Mead.
was the, I know this is different than Landmark, but since we spent so long with Landmark, what was the density we were utilizing Landmark? Do you remember what they were?
By the last iteration of it, because it changed a lot over the years, it did fit within our code because they were only, I think on the final approval, we're requesting 24 dwelling units per acre. 24 dwelling units total. And their property in total was about 2 acres, so I mean, they were probably around that 12 units per acre, actually. The majority of their development was gonna wind up being the hotel, so I think they were at 24 units and 100 hotel rooms, if I recall correctly, on their last approval, which fell within our land development code standards as they exist today. I know their floor area ratio, which was the other part of that for the hotel that you asked about earlier, they were capped, like maxed out on floor area ratio for MX2 in their last approved.
So that's why it works through the existing code was,
Yes.
it was lower
They
density.
they were pushing the limit on floor area ratio. I remember they were just under the cap, but they were quite a bit under on the density because they had kept, initial versions had a lot more residential units, but they kept reducing them over the years.
Mr. Alberto? No? Okay. Okay, anyone else? Seconds? All right. Thirds?
Are we looking for some types of recommendation?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna ask Chris. What do you want out of this?
Yeah, I mean, we would appreciate any type of head nods direction of an option here to kind of start moving forward. Or not, say no, just hold off, don't do it now, that's fine. But really, for us looking at our process, the next steps would be to start drafting up the actual comp plan and land development code amendment for this. And if we know which kind of option or direction to take or something in between, we'll start going there.
I headed on MX3, option 3.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I had not a process that you guys undertake, and I know in your engineering world and planning world, and I love talking about that bridge to people out there because I tell people it's just awesome to think that years ago they got together and they knew on what day that pylon was going to be placed, and they knew how long it was going to take. And they're, weather's part of it, but they're just lined up start to finish. And I don't know what this development manager's role is. I don't know. I know you have engineering capabilities and planning capabilities, but I'd love to see these recommendations turned into a timeline that include some of these piecemeals we're doing. Land development code, hotel rewrites, all of those things, but also those market analysis. The developer back here, he's obviously got some thoughts and plans and ideas of what it'll take to make it profitable for him to do that, and he's got a rendering up there, and that's good. But anybody else coming in here, and I think it might come back to the city acquiring land for redevelopment. Am I on that list? Actually, in the recommendations, and I don't know when and where if it even exists, but it says you'll develop a plan with properties to acquire on it. That's fair to everybody to know. Who are those properties? When are they going to be acquired? All that kind of stuff. So I'm looking for a roadmap. This has got the components of a roadmap, but it's just kind of spread all apart and it's not sequential. So my head nod is that, and I'm looking forward to what you guys can come up with and helping us all understand the flow of all of this, rerouting the road, financing. Big part of it is you got to go find the financing. There's discussion in here about getting that funding, some of the grants and some of the sources of it, but it's not laid out. And so I know that in the development world, you're gonna be doing a lot of financial work up front to support the stuff that comes behind it. Otherwise, it's like, oh man, that didn't work out. Then you just force it in, you force it on people, and well, we gotta raise more money, sell bonds, whatever it is. So I request that staff, begin a process of taking the recommendations of that and to begin to update council staff and the public, the stakeholders with this document in a timely, sequential fashion.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
So my recommendation would definitely be option 3 as well. I think that meeting with stakeholders, hearing feedback from the business community, from developers, et cetera, is valuable information. And I appreciate the process that you and your staff have gone through in helping to develop this. I understand that not everything's going to be a perfect linear motion here with anything in life. But at the same time, I like that you're attacking these things as they're needed and as they're important. I would also like to just state that I think this is a good idea across the board for us to always look at everything that we do as a city and say, are we standing in the way of the free market? Are we standing in the way of development? Because we have put all these guardrails into place, the parking, the stormwater, the landscaping, et cetera, that have to be met regardless of the density in this particular case. But we are currently standing in the way of the free market, and that's what we don't want to do as a government, in my opinion and in my philosophy. So I'm all for this. I look forward to not only that development that we saw a very early rendering to, and we're certainly never going to hold anyone to anything or even speak of what we've seen tonight if it's completely different than what it was. But we want to encourage that type of development in our city. It's what our city needs moving forward because we have all of the right processes in place to handle that. So very much in favor for option 3. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, I'm in favor with option 3, but I want to put some caveats on there. Adequate parking, and I'd love to say no Airbnb, but what do I have to say, But adequate parking so we don't see what I'm seeing now
Absolutely.
at some of the other places.
All right, Mr. Mead.
I'm definitely in favor of one of the options, enhancing the density. I don't know that we're really here to make the decision which option tonight. I know we don't have a full council here tonight, so I'm definitely in favor of moving forward with an MX3 with an option that we can take to the public and the downtown property owners and find out from them what they prefer. I also like Councilman Payne's suggestion that we be mindful of our downtown master plan. I know we've had many over the years, and I know that you're continuing that forward. So if we need another workshop just on that to see how we're doing and what we're doing, and if there's anything the council can provide, I'd certainly be open to such a workshop to keeping the big picture of our plan and it moving forward. I know the state's working on it. I know that that we have a lot of great things, but that is something that's very important to me, is keeping our downtown being reshaped in the way that we agreed to in the years past. So I would support enhancing the density with an MX3 option with the ability to bring these specifics to the folks that we can find.
For sure, yeah, like I said, this is really the first discussion here. There's a lot more to come. We'll be here a lot more talking about this. Really just wanted to get it to you guys after hearing from the public and start this conversation. So I appreciate it.
We appreciate you. Thank you. Mr. Peters, anything else? All right, we'll resume at 6. We're adjourned.